Hey, great to have you here. So today we're going to be discussing episode 7 of Dexter Original Sin, titled The Big Bad Body Problem. Before jumping into the episode, I did want to say thank you for your theories on my kidnapper breakdown video. It was great engaging with you guys on the different possibilities here and there, which we did learn more about in this episode. Jumping to the high-level thoughts on this episode, I thought the characters overall were pretty strong. There wasn't any specific character that I felt really dragged the episode down. I think they were all solid across the board. No major issues really with anybody here. I will say maybe Patrick Dempsey's character as the captain was overacting a little bit here and there, but beyond that, it felt really strong across the board from all the actors here. As far as the cinematography goes in this episode, there were some weird fast-forward cuts throughout this episode. It was very reminiscent of the original Saw movie where they're just doing a lot of shaking cameras and a lot of fast movements here and there. As far as the high-level plot goes, we have Dexter dodging getting caught a few times and stepping back from the social life comedy that we had in the prior episode. We have Deb continue to be rebellious here. We had a little bit less time spent on Harry flashbacks, it felt like, and I didn't really see any value in any of the flashbacks they did include here, beyond maybe setting up some future events. Harry and Maria worked really well in the NHI case, so definitely starting to set up a relationship between those two. And then finally, we did get some answers on the kidnapper storyline. It was kind of weirdly done, though, because it felt like we kept things really uncertain throughout the entire first half of the season, and then majority of this episode even kept things a little bit uncertain here and there, but then at the very end of the episode, we drop multiple hints for the reveal of the kidnapper, so felt somewhat rushed in some areas, but all around, it felt like a pretty strong episode. If I'm giving this one a rating as far as either positive, neutral, negative, I'm going to say positive for this episode. It definitely wasn't a perfect episode. There were some pacing problems and scenes that didn't really feel like they added a lot of value, but across the board, I felt like I got strong character development here and strong acting by the actors in this episode, and we finally got some answers, regardless of really how they did it. They finally gave us some answers here, and we'll have to see how the last 3 episodes play out, because there's going to be a lot that goes on between Dexter and the kidnapper, and probably a cat and mouse game that's going to go on between the two of them. So definitely look forward to seeing how that plays out. But yeah, as I mentioned, positive for this episode. So now we're going to jump into the spoilers and break down some of the specific scenes of the episode. So spoiler warning here. So we opened the episode where we left off in the prior one with Dexter showing up at Alligator Alley with the body of Levi Reed, and a cop's there and confronting him, saying, "Hey, why are you here? This is a crime scene." The cop says, "Turn around." And instead of doing so, he really leans into the situation, says, "Hey, I'm in forensics," and he proceeds to the crime scene. Felt similar to, I think it was season 5 with him and Lumen, where you have that guy running around in the saran wrap, that crime scene there, where he just magically shows up, and they're like, "Hey, why are you here?" And he's there because he's there for forensics, but realistically, he never got the call for it. Same situation here, but it feels a little bit weirder with Dexter new as an intern. I think Masuka would have known if Dexter was informed to come to the crime scene, but either way, he runs into Masuka, and Masuka's like, "Oh yeah, totally fine." So he's not at all weirded out with Dexter being there. And then Maria shows up, and she's also not weirded out by Dexter being there. So it seems like across the board, they're just like, "Oh yeah, crime scene, you're here, of course." So they tell Dexter, "Hey, get the fingerprints off the arm and do what you need to do." He realizes, hey, this may come back to me and connect to me because this arm's clearly Ferrer's. So he comes up with the idea of throwing the arm into the alligators for them to eat it. And he comes running out of the swamp and pretends like, "Oh God, they were going to attack me." But in reality, there were so many cops there, nobody saw him grab the arm, bring it over to the alligators. Like, it felt a little bit too convenient for that to magically work for him, but that winds up happening, and they're just like, "Okay, I guess we lost the evidence, let's just go out to eat now." You then have Dexter take the body to a dumpster, which will ultimately be taken to a landfill. I'm not sure how that necessarily works super well, because the full body's still in there. Somebody's probably going to see it, but I guess he assumes, hey, they're not going to tie it back to me at this point. He then throws like a banana peel on the ground. I'm not sure if there's supposed to be some reference there, so let me know, unless it was like some Mario Kart thing where he's just throwing it on the ground there. We then have a brief cut to the kidnapped captain's son, who's in the cell, and it's very Saw-like vibes here, like it's eerie music, and you see that the kid's trying to make a weapon to attack the kidnapper with. We then come back to the Morgan home where Deb and Dexter are talking with one another, and there's a lot of beep references here, so definitely trying to age the show, saying, hey, beepers are the prominent communication method, and he's getting a lot of messages from Sophia and doesn't know what they mean, and Deb's like relaying them to him. I'm a little surprised Sophia would have a beeper. I get it with Dexter being at his job, but somehow Sophia also has one. She's sending him messages, and he's just kind of blowing it off. Harry then grabs Dexter and takes him out back, and they talk about the situation, and Harry gives him the whole lecture about being sloppy and need to be more careful going forward. Dexter walks away, and Harry sneaks a cigarette to smoke out back, so setting up Harry being very stressed out about the situation. As Dexter's heading off to work, he has a car drive behind him, and sure enough, it's Sophia. She jumps into his car and is really criticizing him for not responding, and he gives the excuse, hey, I was at a crime scene, and she feels very sympathetic and really loving towards him. And then suddenly she sees a condom wrapper on the ground and completely 180s from that and just starts yelling at him and drives off in a fit of rage, leaving Deb there by herself. We then fast forward to Miami Metro where Batista and Bobby are briefing the captain on the kidnappings. Then the captain asks about the Alligator Alley crime, and Dexter's like, hey, my bad for that one. Then we cut to Deb at school, and there's more drama there. She goes up to Sophia and says, hey, you didn't pick me up. And then she goes off on Deb saying, hey, Dexter cheated on me. And Deb's like, he's a total geek. He barely was interested in you. I had to really convince him for that. Then Sophia gets mad at Deb for defending Dexter, and Deb's like, hey, I don't have to always side with you, which will come back later on. We then cut back to Miami Metro where there's a brief scene with Clark and Dexter, and Clark just grabs Dexter aside and says, hey, about the other night. No one knows about me being gay, so can we keep this on the down low? And Dexter's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell anybody. We then have Maria brief the captain on the NHI murders, and she mentions to the captain, no stuff was taken. These kills feel very connected, and Captain's like, what do you think, Harry? And Harry's supportive of Maria, so building that relationship between Harry and Maria. We then cut to our first flashback of the episode with Harry and Laura really wants to stop being an informant, and Harry's like, hey, you'll be done soon. And Laura's like, what if I stop now? And Harry mentions, well, you're going to go to jail, and then your kids are going to go to foster care, so don't think you want that. And we have Dexter rush out to his mom and says, hey, Daddy, and builds that relationship a little bit further with Harry and Dexter there, that attachment with them. Still in the flashbacks, we have Harry come home, and his wife feels very distant from him. He wants to tell her about the affair and the details there, but she's not at all interested in hearing that. And he says sorry. She points out to him, hey, it's the first time you've actually said that, and he picks up his daughter and is really supporting her. We then cut back to present time with Dexter for the first of a couple times this episode. He's trying to research finding a new dump spot for his dead bodies. Obviously, the Alligator Alley's not going to work anymore. And here's the second time we got those fast cutscenes. So those things I mentioned they do in the original Saw where they're just bouncing the camera around a whole lot. They use it quite a bit in this episode. As Dexter's leaving Miami Metro, he sees Batista there looking through the photos of the Alligator Alley crime scene and notices, hey, the ring on the hand. He tells Dexter, hey, this is Ferrer. And he really seems to want justice. Batista's really that honest, let's follow the book and just do everything correctly type of person. They're trying to hammer that home in this scene specifically, wondering if that's going to play into Resurrection at all. But we have Dexter here really manipulate Batista. He gets him to back off saying, hey, leave that alone. They're going to be happy that he's dead. And let's instead focus on this kidnapping case. This kid really needs your help, right, Batista? So a very manipulative version of Dexter here, trying to get Batista to focus more on stuff that he wants him to focus on and disregard the crime that Dexter performed. We then cut back to the captain's son in the cell, and the kidnapper is trying to deliver food to him. And he's like, hey, I'm not going to eat. And the kidnapper comes in. He's really trying to bait him into the room. And when he comes in, the kid slashes at the kidnapper and makes him bleed, which is going to come into play later on in the episode. The kidnapper then grabs the finger of the kid and is about to cut it off. You have the kid scream, my dad's a cop, which there's some pause by the kidnapper here, which is kind of telling, but he pauses for a bit and then winds up cutting the finger off anyway. We then cut to Harry and Maria, who are following up a lead on the NHI case. They go to this guy's house and ask, hey, is this your car outside? He says, no, it belongs to this other lady there. She comes out and says, hey, I've only had it for 2 days. Harry tries to get more information on who sold them the car, and the guy's like, I'm not going to cooperate with you whatsoever, so don't really get much info there. We then cut to Dexter, who's researching where did other famous killers put their dead bodies. He has this kind of weird scene where these fake killers are coming into his room and talking to him, and he's interacting with them, and he's pretty much turning down all of their options that they used as past killers. We then cut to Deb, who's at volleyball practice, and Tiffany, the popular girl, comes up to Deb and confronts her about having stolen her car. And Deb's like, I didn't do that. And then we find out Sophia apparently told Tiffany that it was Deb. And Deb really yells at Sophia. And Sophia gives the line back to her, I don't always have to side with you type of thing. So very fitting there and coming full circle with her and Sophia. And Deb winds up punching Tiffany right in the face. She winds up bleeding. And the coach just yells, go to my office now. Then back at Miami Metro, there's a group of people together. And Dexter just proposes to the cops, hey, where would you dump dead bodies if you had to? And Clark actually says something here. He says, under cement for a new build, which is definitely an Easter egg for Trinity, since that's what he did to the kidnapped kid. And then Harry comes into the room and says, hey, what are you guys talking about? And Masuka, of course, just gives the obvious answer saying, oh, we're just deciding where we would hide dead bodies. And Harry just looks straight at Dexter with a serious face, which is super funny because they're obviously on the inside joke of Dexter asking because he wants to know for himself personally. But Harry's just not happy with him at all. We then have a small scene where Masuka's trying to give Dexter dating advice, and he winds up paging Sophia from Dexter to help get her back. We then have Bobby and Batista come in, bring a box that has the finger from the captain's kid. Dexter says to himself he really wants to kill the kidnapper. People who harm kids are really high on Dexter's list as far as wanting to take them out. Then Tanya confirms the severed finger came from pruning shears, just like what happened with Jimmy Powell. And Dexter winds up finding some blood on the box that could be from the kidnapper, so a little bit of a clue there. and he puts the blood in a slide, which is kind of another Easter egg with Dexter having a blood slide that he's staring at. We have Tanya approach the captain with evidence with Harry in there as well, and Tanya mentions, hey, the finger does belong to your son. They've confirmed the case is connected with the judge's son's case, and she also confirms the kid was alive when the finger was severed at least. She also mentions to him, hey, we found some blood in the box. Maybe we'll find something there. And she's like, hey, Dexter's the one that actually did this. And the captain gives a really weird response. He just points over to Harry. He's like, hey, your boy, Dexter? Like, yes, obviously the guy who works here with you. That scene ends with Harry just telling the captain, hey, we're doing everything we can. And the captain's like, do more, which is kind of a weird answer to give because Harry isn't even on that case anymore. But I guess the captain's probably just supposed to be flustered in the scene. We then cut to another flashback with Laura getting home with her groceries, and Jimenez shows up and says, hey, come with us. And she's just supposed to leave her groceries there on the step right there, but she winds up going with them. We get a weird shot of Estrada swimming. I don't know really what the point of that scene was, but then he asks her to get naked and swim with him, which I don't know really what the point of that is. Is it just to prove that she's not wearing a wire? Maybe that's the intent there, but they don't really wind up going swimming. They just sit at the end of the pool. So he's like, oh, I really like someone who swims, but they don't do that. It's just talking while she's naked in the pool, which, okay, it's fine, I guess. She tells him, hey, I want to provide for my family, and he seems to know a lot about her family. He mentions Dexter's name, actually, and he also mentions a shipment is coming next week, which is very foreshadowing of what's going to wind up happening in all likelihood. And that scene really closes out with her walking away and Estrada telling Jimenez, hey, keep an eye on her. We then cut back to Dexter, who gets a page from Sophia that says, go to hell. So I guess Masuka's pickup line probably did not work on her. Since Dexter is super invested in this kid kidnapper and wanting to get them saved ultimately, he's really researching the fingers and the difference between the captain's kid and the Jimmy Powell case. And he notices there's some hesitancy with the cut there, which obviously we saw in real time with when the kid said, hey, my dad's a cop. There was a pause there when the cut took place. We then fast forward to Harry and Deb at home, and Harry's talking to Deb, and she mentions, hey, I got suspended from school and kicked off the volleyball team. And Harry points out, hey, to afford Florida State, you're going to need to be scouted and get a scholarship ultimately. And she's pretty much, screw team sports, and just storms off. She runs into Dexter outside. They have a fun scene with each other here, and Dexter's closing advice to Deb, hey, next time, don't get caught, which is obviously a big part of the code. We have Dexter show up at Miami Metro, and we have the captain who's sitting in Dexter's seat, so a little bit eerie there. He approaches him and shows the captain the hesitation cut for the son's finger. And we notice the captain has a bandage on his wrist, so he has a cut on his wrist, like when the kid slashed the kidnapper earlier in the episode. And it turns out the blood type on the box matched the blood type of the kid, so they're like, it could be the kid's, could be someone else who just has the same blood type. You know, could be a relative, maybe. It doesn't have to be, I guess. So definitely leads us to be thinking, oh, it's definitely the captain as the kidnapper at this point in time. Suddenly, Dexter puts two and two together. I'm not sure really he had enough information there to make that connection, but he decides the captain is the kidnapper because they have the same blood type. And I guess because he saw a cut on his arm, and that's why, but I don't know. I feel like from the viewer standpoint, we saw the cut happen earlier in the episode, and we saw a lot of stuff that Dexter didn't see. So it's fair for us to know, but somehow Dexter is immediately like, oh, you got a cut. Blood type's the same. You're the kidnapper. And then really to close it out, they hammer it home even more. Like maybe there was some mystery still in the slightest bit saying, maybe they're just trying to misdirect us and it's not actually the captain. But then we have the captain buying the Lunchables or whatever they are at the end and says, oh, they're for my kid. So clearly this is set up as the captain being the kidnapper. So while it was a fun, suspenseful scene at the end of the episode, it felt like we rushed a lot in there. Like we spent, as I mentioned at the beginning, the first half of the season and the majority of this episode also kind of putting some misdirects, some red herrings for different characters here and there. The captain was certainly one of the people that we thought was possibly the kidnapper, but wasn't a guarantee. And then suddenly at the end of the episode, we hammer like so many things. Oh, he got cut. The blood type's the same. He hesitated when the kid said, hey, my dad's a cop. He's buying the food for the kid. So it felt like we went from, oh, we don't know much about what's going on here, to suddenly we just got slammed with so much evidence with this being the kidnapper. I feel like if they just ended it without doing the whole him buying the Lunchables thing at the end, that would have been fine, but it felt like they hammered it a little bit too much. Like, hey, did you forget? This is the killer. We just showed you previously in the last scene, but hey, once again, it's the killer. Hey, so in some ways I enjoyed the kind of the cat and mouse game a little bit there that we got towards the end of the episode. They did it a little bit too much with too much evidence. Like, I get it. We pretty much slammed the door shut. There's no mystery at this point in time, which you don't need to have. I actually went into this season hoping that they would give us the big bet early so we get more build-up time with them. But if we're going to play the mystery game, which we were definitely doing in this season, we feel like we just abandoned ship on this episode and went immediately to, oh, this is the guy. Mystery's gone. We have to end the season somehow here quickly. So, I don't know. Felt a little bit rushed as far as the reveal goes. And obviously, as I mentioned, it's the captain at this point in time. So we know this. I did my speculation video recently this past week talking about it. And I leaned towards somebody in the cartel because of the whole connection with the finger being cut off. And there needed to have some point of the flashback, which I guess we don't necessarily need at this point in time. But yeah, there was definitely things in favor for the captain. Obviously, he may have some motive with not being with his wife anymore, and maybe that makes him not like his kid. I know there was thoughts previously, maybe the kid belongs to the other guy, but we did the blood matches at the end of this episode, and I know they could have the same blood type regardless of being actually related or not, but they hammered it home enough that it seems like they are related, and it can't be the other guy's kid at this point. So biologically, it seems like it's his kid. Whether or not he's involved in his life as much as the other guy may be a different story, but the whole angle of it's not his kid doesn't seem as likely at this point, but he may still have some frustration there. The whole point of the judge maybe screwed him with the divorce, I feel like is certainly possible at this point because, what's the reason he would go for the judge's kid and not somebody else randomly? So there's some potential with that one, but I think it seems to be pretty likely that it's his kid at this point, and he may just not really like him or feels like the relationship with his wife strained his relationship with his kid ultimately. I will say I'm a little bummed we went with Dempsey because, as I've talked about before, he's done this role before. He's been the killer cop already. So why are we doing this again? I will say one point in favor of that I mentioned in that prior video is that he did it really well. So maybe they felt like, hey, you did that well. Do it well in our show too. So there's some points I get there. We'll have to see now that we know who the big bad ultimately is, where the other characters really get their developments. How is Gio going to be tied into things? Is he going to play a big role somewhere? After seeing this recent episode, I feel like Clark actually could be the hero with the NHI case at some point in time. Seems like he's more tied to that situation, so you could either have him be the killer, be a victim, or be the hero in this situation. If Dempsey's the killer, probably not going to have another cop killer in Miami Metro. I get that they're really corrupt, it seems like at this point, to Maria's point that she made when she joined the force. But probably not going to have him be the bad guy then there. You can either have him as the victim or the hero. I think it'd be more fun to have him be the hero, but I think he's probably going to still tie into that storyline somewhere. And then the other folks, Tanya, for example, like what is the point of Tanya's role thus far? Unless they really give us something at the end, or I don't know, maybe like the captain's going to kill her because she gets suspicious, but it feels like that role at this point has been pretty wasted. But I'm hoping we have 3 episodes left. Maybe something will happen there. Things like the ice truck killer, I know some people thought that could have been involved here. It seemed pretty likely to me that those were just Easter eggs, which seems like it's probably the case at this point in time. They like to throw some nods here and there, like the episode I mentioned. Trinity got a nod here with the whole cement being buried underneath the house. But what are your guys' thoughts with how they handle some of these other characters? Would love to see your feedback on that down below, and your thoughts on the big reveal of Captain Aaron Spencer being the kidnapper. What are your thoughts there? Do you think it's a good choice? Do you think the motive will ultimately be there? Or do you think they probably should have gone another direction? Would be curious to see your feedback down below. I think my thoughts with the cartel being the likely option. 2 things probably should have been obvious to me that led me away from that I mentioned in that prior video. One being the cops were on the cartel, so it wouldn't be very surprising if that's just winds up being the answer. And then 2, having Jimenez in the original series, you knew he wasn't going to die in the season, so it would have been hard having somebody like that be the killer without having some finality to their arc in this season. So yeah, just overall, let me know your thoughts on this episode and the direction for the final 3 episodes of Original Sin. And are you hoping we get a season 2? What are your thoughts on how we've handled the season thus far? Is it something that you want to watch more of, that you feel like, you know what, this cast does a good enough job, while Resurrection, something great I'm looking forward to? Original Sin could be its own thing that you can enjoy as well. Just share your thoughts down in the comments below with that as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.